This video is sponsored by DistroKid. Upload unlimited songs, EPs, and albums to all the major streaming platforms such as Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, Tidal, Deezer, Google Play, TikTok, and many more, all for just $19.99 a year, and keep 100% of your royalties. If you want to save 7% off at checkout, use my VIP link in the video description down below. But before you can go and release your music through DistroKid, you first need to find the best solution for recording your music, and that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. Now, recently, a lot of people have been asking me for my opinion as to whether they should buy Logic Pro X or Ableton Live. And to be honest, I never really used to have a definitive answer to this question until Logic updated to the 10.5 version of their software. And they introduced a brand new feature set that basically meant it was comparable to Ableton Live's feature set. So in this video today, we are going to compare the two softwares and we're going to see which one is the best. Now, I'm not going to use this video as an opportunity to do a showdown between Mac versus Windows, which is superior for music production. If you do want that video, let me know in the comment section down below and we'll save the debate for another time. But what I do actually want to talk about is which software is actually the best value for money, because on the surface, Logic Pro X does appear to be the best bang for buck, coming in at £199.99, whereas Ableton Live has this really strange structure to their pricing, and it's actually in tiers. So if you want to pick up a copy of Ableton Live, you have three different options. You've got Ableton Lite, which is like a beginner's entry level. You've got reduced tracks. There's a lot of things missing from the software, but you can pick that up for £69. Then if you want to step it up, you can go up to Ableton Standard, which is around £329. And there you get basically the full version of Ableton. You get unlimited audio tracks, unlimited MIDI tracks, all the things you kind of need in order to do a huge project. Now there's then the ultimate tier, which is Ableton Live Suite, and this is about £539. Now what you get inside of Ableton Live Suite is extra Ableton packs, so you get more MIDI instruments like pianos, synths, and drum booths, stuff like that. And then you also get this super advanced feature called Max for Live. Now, Max for Live basically allows you to create your own plugins inside of Ableton, so really customize the certain things you require for your live performance. Now, I bought Ableton Live Suite because I thought I was going to fully maximize this feature, but to be honest, after the first few months, I couldn't get it to do exactly what I wanted it to do when I was wanting to do live looping inside of Ableton Live, so I soon sort of gave up, and I haven't used it in over probably 12 months, so I didn't theoretically need Ableton Live Suite. Now, if you are a student, you can pick up both Logic Pro X and Ableton Live on student discount. I picked up Ableton Live with a total of 40% off, which was insane. I got Ableton Live Suite for about £323. However, if you want to pick up Logic Pro X, you can get their educational bundle, which comes with about 5 different Mac softwares. You get Final Cut Pro, you get Motion Graphic Design 5 or whatever it's called, and then you get Logic Pro X, you get Compressor 4, and also you get the Main Stage 3, which is the live performance version of Logic Pro X, and that's pretty cool. So yes, the Logic Pro X software is way cheaper than Ableton Live, but the problem is the barrier to entry for the actual system to run the software on. In order to get access to Logic Pro X, you need to have an Apple computer. And right now, if you want the lowest spec MacBook laptop, it's about £1,200 for a Mac computer. So that's pretty pricey. However, obviously you can pick up a pretty cheap and great spec Windows PC laptop, pick up Ableton Live, and overall the whole package would be cheaper. So now that we've taken a look at which software is the better value, I want to split this review into 4 different sections. So we're going to take a look at recording audio. We're then going to take a look at the production tools each DAW provides you with. We're then going to take a look at some of the MIDI settings, because I think these are quite essential if you are wanting to do something really advanced with the software. And then finally, we're going to take a look at how we can use both softwares in a live performance situation. So let's take a look at recording audio inside of these DAWs. Now, both softwares work pretty similar, they have the same premise when it comes to just recording audio into the software. Both can do stereo audio channels, they can do mono audio channels. You can have input monitoring on, you can change the output, you can have record arm, all them type of things work identical. However, the actual workflow differs greatly. So inside of Logic Pro X, we can record multiple audio takes and then create a track stack. So let's say you want to nail a particular vocal section of a performance. So you could grab the cycle tool and then you could take the verse section and you could let Logic just loop and continuously loop this section while you are recording, and you could just keep performing and performing and performing until you finally nail that performance. And then what's going to happen is Logic is automatically going to create a track stack folder, and all of these takes will appear inside of a little drop down menu, and then you can take your mouse and you can cut each take together and then finally comp the vocals to have the immaculate and perfect take with the best bits of each performance. Now, I love this workflow inside of Logic Pro X, and I prefer this greatly over Ableton Live. Now, if we take a look inside of Ableton Live, the way it works is kind of similar when it comes to setting up the loop cycle tool and then continuously recording. So you can see if we set up the loop cycle tool and continuously record, this is going to work correctly. However, when it comes to comping the audio together, you can select each section inside of the little sort of clip view, but then let's say just one of the sections just wasn't still right and you needed to record that final take. As soon as you click record, it's going to delete all of that comping that you did. It's going to delete all of the audio takes that you just did, and you're back to square one. You may now have the perfect ending to that performance, but then you can't find the other performance anymore because it's overwritten it. So the workaround here is before you do that final vocal take, you have to duplicate the track and then record the new takes on that secondary track. But what ends up happening is throughout a performance, you may need a break because you've been singing for ages but still just haven't nailed the take. So you take a break, you come back, and then you come back again and again and again, and you might end up having like 8 audio tracks just for your vocals, whereas on Logic you can just have one vocal track and then have all of the takes no matter when you took those takes in one folder. Now, this is a major problem because Ableton Live is already pretty CPU intensive. If you take a look in the top right corner, you can see it tells you your CPU usage. And because Logic is built for the Mac and it's super optimized to work for the Mac, it means it is less CPU intensive because it's super streamlined. Whereas Ableton is built for Windows and Mac, so it's not as efficient with its CPU usage. Now, for a day-to-day workflow, this CPU optimization and usage isn't too major of an issue. However, if you're doing huge projects like cinematic movie music, you're doing a lot of virtual instruments with loads of different strings, violins, all that type of stuff, and then you're also running lots of audio channels, then the CPU may become a bit of a problem. Now, obviously, your Mac's probably going to struggle anyways because, some of them only have a 2-core CPU. But again, this video is not about how Windows PCs can be more powerful than a Mac PC. We'll save that for another day. So just bear in mind the CPU optimization for what you actually want to do when it comes to recording your projects. Now, something that is overlooked when people compare Ableton Live to Logic Pro X is the templates feature inside of Logic Pro X. This is absolutely fantastic. What we can do is we can create custom templates with a variety of pre-set up audio tracks with different configured effects and set up audio tracks with certain sounds on that we can instantly recall every time we want to start a brand new track. Now, inside of Ableton Live, I found it very difficult to find a way to create a template. There's no native way, from my understanding, to actually go create template from this track. Yes, you can do this feature called save a copy, which essentially duplicates a file and you can save it as an alternative version. And then you could rename that version as EP1 template 2, for example, and then you could recall that in the future when you are recording for that specific EP project. But inside Logic Pro X, what we can do is we can actually create a designated template that we can just boot up from the new file menu. It's absolutely fantastic. You can go, right, let's save this project we've just created as a template, and inside that template you can have all of your audio tracks pre-configured with all the inputs and outputs, all of your MIDI tracks pre-configured for your studio setup, for example. So then you don't have to do that every time you start a brand new project. This is just fantastic for making your workflow so much easier and faster. Now, if you're wanting to use these DAW softwares for music production, then you're going to want to decide which software sounds better, because it sounds crazy, but each software has its own tonality. Now, a lot of people say Logic sounds better than Ableton, and to be honest, I think they both sound great. And it's, you know, your normal average guys aren't going to be like, he recorded that in Logic Pro X. But if you want to actually listen to some real life examples, then check out the links in the description down below that'll take you over to Spotify, Apple Music, whatever streaming platform you listen on, because I have various different tracks that were done in Ableton and exclusively done in Logic Pro X. Now, the track We Can Go was produced in Logic Pro X, and the track Eloise was produced in Ableton Live. So take a listen to the pair of them and let me know in the comment section down below which one you prefer the sound of. And also, I released those tracks using DistroKid, so if you want to release yours as well, check out that VIP link and save 7% off your distribution subscription. Now, I want to talk about the production tools inside of both of the DAWs. Now, both Logic Pro X and Ableton Live come with a heap of production tools for you to use. So these are things like reverb, delays, compression, EQs, stuff like that. Now, inside of Logic Pro X, we have a very visual experience with all of our plugins and our production tools. You know, the delays and the reverbs and the EQs, they're all very colorful and intuitive to use. And I really like that, especially the way I learn and stuff. I'm very visual with everything. So I like the fact that it's really colorful and exciting. I don't get really bored when I'm playing around with it. However, Ableton Live, we get pretty similar tools, but they're presented in a different fashion. It's got that more Ableton look about it, much more flatter, and they're a bit more like clinical the way they look. They're less exciting and colorful, but it doesn't mean they're less as enjoyable to use. I still enjoy using them, but it is just a slightly different workflow depending on how you like to be stimulated when you look at things on the software. Now, a key feature that's missing inside of Ableton Live, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't find this, is auto-tune. Inside of Logic Pro X, you kind of get the complete bundle of literally every single plugin you would require out of the box in order to create professional music. You get literally everything to a pretty quality standard, to a point where you don't really need to justify any purchase of third-party plugins. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. But Ableton Live has a heap of stuff and lots of stuff Logic doesn't have, in like really weird sort of things you can do, but it's missing some core fundamentals, and that is auto-tune. I literally, for the life of me, cannot find an auto-tune inside of Ableton Live. And I know a lot of producers recommend using like 2% of an auto-tune on your backing vocals just to tighten them up and polishing them on your performance. And when I was using Ableton Live, I was like, oh, I'll add a little bit of auto-tune just to polish up those backing vocals. Couldn't find any, so I just had to leave them dry. Whereas in Logic, you know, you can boot up the stock auto-tune and start manipulating your voice, extreme or just subtle, in order to enhance your performance. And I think that's a real thing that's missed inside of Ableton. You may say, oh, well, you just need to sing better, Ben, but it's not the fact that I can't sing. It's just a production thing you do when you're producing studio music. You just tweak things to make them sound immaculate. Now, a lot of people say that the Logic stock plugins sound a lot better than the Ableton stock plugins, and I would agree with this, to be fair. The delays, the EQ especially, sounds really professional inside of Logic. And the stuff in Ableton doesn't sound bad, but the EQ does sound a little bit harsh, especially on the higher frequencies. But the major thing I love about the Logic plugins is the customization. So if we take a look at a compressor, for example, you can see inside of the compressor, we have a variety of different types and styles of compressors. You can see when I'm clicking through this menu, each compressor changes its visual representation. It changes color, it changes style. And this gives you a key representation of which compressor this is trying to emulate in real life. So it's trying to emulate this vintage one, this iconic modern one. So it means it changes the tonality of the compressor considerably depending on which one you have booted up. However, in Ableton Live, we have a stock compressor, and that's kind of where it ends. It's just a stock compressor, and you can only change the parameters within that stock compressor. It's very difficult to manipulate the tonality of the compressor because it's just a stock compressor. Yes, you can change the settings inside of it, but you just cannot change the tonality, the fundamental tonality of the components inside of that compressor. If you buy Logic Pro X, for a long period of time, you're not personally, in my opinion, going to be required to buy any third-party plugins. There's no justification because the stuff that's provided out of the box just sounds that good. You know, my thing in particular, I love the Alchemy synth keyboard collection inside of Logic Pro X. It's absolutely fantastic. They redesigned it a few years back and it does some brilliant synthesizer keyboard sounds to a point where I sometimes use that more than the third-party plugins that I recently bought. Now, I did recently buy, about a year ago, I bought the Complete 12 Ultimate package in the Sound of Summer discount, which I think concluded this week for this year's Sound of Summer. But basically, the Complete 12 Ultimate package just gives you like thousands and thousands of sounds, but they sound unbelievable. They're like they sound these crazy strings that sound literally like a real violin. So the reason why I bought that was because I was primarily doing my music production inside of Ableton Live. And I just, from a personal standpoint, felt the Ableton Live packs for what I wanted to do were a little bit lackluster. Now, if you're doing more EDM and hip hop, you're probably going to love the sounds coming out of Ableton Live because that's what the software is sort of orientated around, that type of genre. And all of the packs sound great for that, you know, do them like sort of grimy beats with the drum booth samples and things. But I do more like classic rock type music, and I want more of like a cleaner, authentic sound out of the sample packs that I'm using. So I upgraded to Complete 12 Ultimate just because I was using Ableton Live and just was really unhappy with the packs that were inside of the software. It just didn't sound how I wanted it to. Now, on the subject of the Ableton Live packs, I do really like the interface for downloading them. So unlike with Logic Pro X, when I first downloaded Logic Pro X, you know, you boot it up and then it's like, oh, do you want to download the additional sounds, you know, the additional sounds that you have inside of this software? And then you just click yes, and it like downloads like 60 gigabytes of sounds. Now, especially on a Mac, if you own a Mac, you know that the majority of them only have about 256 gigabytes of storage in them. So installing the software and then installing a huge sound library onto your disk drive, you soon clog up this laptop. This laptop behind me here, I've had since about 2014, and it's got like 10 gigabytes, no joke, 10 gigabytes left on the disk drive. And that's after clearing loads of stuff out over the years of having it. Whereas with Ableton Live, when you download the software, it downloads the software, but with like some dead basic sounds, and then you can go to Ableton Live's website and individually download the packs that you require for your genres of music. It's great. You can scroll through all of the packs, get a little bit of information about what the pack is, and then just simply click bang, I want to download these 10 packs, and then they just seamlessly appear inside of Ableton Live. Now, yes, inside of Logic Pro X, you can go into the audio folders inside of the software and like undownload stuff and re-download stuff and select things, but it's just that first initial install, it kind of just heaps everything onto your disk drive, which is a little bit of a shame. I'm going to say straight away, Ableton Live has the best MIDI integration out of both of the softwares. And the main reason why I'm saying this is because Ableton Live can send and receive MIDI clock data. However, Logic Pro X can only send MIDI clock data. Now, if you don't know what I mean by MIDI clock data, this is basically the tempo of a device. So let's say I have an external device and I want to send the clock of that external device to my laptop, and I then want the laptop to receive it with Ableton Live. Well, you can do that. However, in Logic, if you want Logic to run off the tempo of an external MIDI device, then it's just not going to happen. The other day, I was trying to connect my Boss RC300 loop pedal to a Logic Pro X, and then I was trying to slave Logic Pro X to the loop pedal, so the loop pedal was the master clock source, and I could not figure out any way to make Logic Pro X receive this clock data. However, in Ableton Live, it's super easy. You literally just click a button in the top left corner called External Sync, and boom, you're up and running. The software's running off an external clock source. Now, if you do want to sync a device to your computer, so the computer is the clock source and then the external device is the slave, then Logic Pro X can do this. And to be honest, it has great clock data and time code. So you're going to have a fantastic, seamless experience when you want to do this inside of Logic. And also you get a pretty seamless experience when you want to do that inside of Ableton Live. Now, some other MIDI settings that I want to touch on is actually MIDI CC data. So this is when you're playing on a MIDI keyboard plugged in like via your USB cable, and this is controlling your software instruments, maybe like piano or like a classic Rhodes, something like that. This keyboard controls that. Now, both softwares, they can do that, no problem. You can set up obviously a USB remote controller with your MIDI keyboard and it works perfectly fine. But I actually prefer using MIDI inside of Logic Pro X. Now, the reason why I prefer using MIDI notes and editing MIDI notes inside of Logic Pro X is their super well thought out piano roll. Now, Ableton Live has a piano roll as well, and they look pretty much identical. Now, they just display the MIDI notes in that sort of little grid. But the reason why I prefer Logic Pro X is just the way it lays stuff out. So if you boot up a Logic instrument, it'll tell you which notes are your crashes, your snares, your kick drums, and then it will also allow you to change the velocity super seamless. Now, you can do all of this in Ableton Live, like change the velocity and stuff, but it doesn't give you a visual representation. If you see here, inside of Logic Pro X, when I change the velocity of this note, it goes from blue all the way up to red. So red says this is going to be a super loud note. Green tells you, oh, this is pretty quiet, it's going to be good. Blue tells you this is hardly audible, it's very faint. And then your orange tells you it's in the middle and it's going to be like a moderately loud note. However, in Ableton Live, there's no visual representation when you adjust the velocity of a note. You can see when I change the velocity of this note here, it just stays that solid color that the clip is. Now, another MIDI related setting is quantization. Both Logic Pro X and Ableton Live have brilliant quantization, and Ableton Live's quantization for performing is second to none. It's brilliant. So let's say you're recording your MIDI keyboard into a clip inside a clip view, boom, then you can have record quantization on and it's going to tie right into the grid and it's going to be really accurate. I think it's got a fantastic feature there. But when it comes to quantizing afterwards, so let's say, you've played something in a bit loose to a click track and then you want to quantize it, I prefer Logic Pro X. Now, the reason why I prefer Logic Pro X is because, I can just select everything and then head on over to this menu right here and just select some grooves. I can go swing, I can go shuffle, A, B, or C, and I can do all of this as well inside of Ableton Live, but I don't like the fact that inside of Ableton Live, I have to grab a groove from the browser and drop that groove into the piano roll for it to actually adjust the quantization settings. I prefer just clicking the drop-down menu and just having to play around with the various quantization and then it manipulating from that point. Because the problem is inside of Ableton Live, yes, you can play around with different quantization settings, but if you then want to play around with another one after you've made changes, it's going to apply that groove to the MIDI clip with the applied changes. So it's going to manipulate the already grooved MIDI clip, if that makes sense. So you're not getting an accurate representation of what that groove is applying to that cell. So it means you have to undo those changes and then apply a new groove in order to hear an accurate representation of that groove. Now, to combat this, Ableton Live do have this great feature where you can preview a groove. So you can click in the browser and you can listen to the groove with a sort of clap. It has like a little clappy pattern to go, this is the groove. It's like one. And you'll be like, oh, that's the groove. I'll drag and drop that one. That's the one I want. So I do like the fact that you can preview the grooves and then drag them in. But sometimes you do make a mistake and you go, oh, actually, that wasn't the groove that I imagined once it's actually being played on your MIDI drums. So you have to undo it and then apply the next groove. Otherwise, if you apply the groove to the already applied groove, it's going to mess up the groove. Totally complicated and convoluted. I just don't like the way the MIDI quantization works in that regard. So the final thing I want to compare is which software is the definitive software for live performance. Now, if I made this video literally about 2 months ago, I would have just said Ableton Live, end of the conversation, because Ableton Live had session view and also arrangement view. Now, session view and arrangement view are two different workspaces inside of the software. So arrangement view gives you your more authentic and classic DAW layout where you would normally record a track that you're going to release onto the internet. And then session view gave you this clip sort of layout and you could launch clips, loop clips, record stuff in live and do real rough arrangements and actually perform with Ableton Live on stage. Now, just a few weeks ago, about a month or so ago, Logic added their own version of Session View, and this was called Live Loop Grid. So Logic now has these live loop grids and also an arrangement timeline track view. So now both softwares have the exact same feature set, just in a different layout. Now I actually have a video over here where I compare the two softwares together. I give you some of my first impressions of Logic Live Loops coming from being an Ableton Live user. So if you're interested in that comparison in depth, definitely head on over and check out that video. But to be honest, they work pretty much exactly the same. Having spent a lot more time with Logic Live Loops over the past few weeks when I was recording the Logic Live Loops Ultimate Guide course, link in the description if you want to check that out. But when I was recording that course throughout the few weeks, pretty much both softwares worked identical. The only major difference is what we talked about is sort of the MIDI sync options you have with Ableton Live as a major advantage over Logic Live Loops. Now, when it comes to choosing a software to actually use on stage, I think Ableton Live is the better option. And the main reason is the layout of the software. Now, I know I said earlier on in this video that I loved how colorful Logic was and just how exciting it was to look at. Well, when you're on stage, you just need to be presented with information. And because Ableton Live is like so flat and basic looking, it means when I just quickly glance over at my computer screen, I just can see exactly what the computer's doing and I just get the information I need. I'm like, right, that audio track is playing and now I can get back to performing. However, I find because Logic is just so exciting to look at and it's so colorful, it takes a little bit longer for you to process that information in a live situation because you're kind of like, oh yeah, that's what the software is doing. So Ableton Live definitely wins on the stage front. And also another huge benefit of Ableton Live on stage is how easy it is to set up send and return tracks. Now, you can set up send and return tracks inside of Logic. They're called buses, but I find they're a bit more difficult to see. So they're these little sort of tiny circles that you set up on the mixer and you can change the amount and then, it sends that audio to its destination. But when you just want to have a view of all of the send and return tracks, they sort of get a bit cluttered because they're combined with the normal audio tracks. Whereas in Ableton Live, you can see there's a clear distinction between the audio and MIDI tracks to the left-hand side and the send and return tracks to the right-hand side. That split in the middle of the screen makes it super obvious that these are send and return tracks. So it just means it makes it super easy for making sure when you're making adjustments on the fly, it's going to the right destination, or if you need to mute a send or return tracks, to deactivate something, you can just know you're going to click the right one without making a silly mistake. So let me know in the comment section down below which software you think is the best, because I'd be quite interested to see what everyone's thoughts are on this topic. Because me personally, I've been using Logic Pro X a lot more in my day-to-day workflow. Ever since the 10.5 update and the brand new Live Loops work grid, I've just been really enjoying the way that it operates over Ableton Live. If you want to learn more about the brand new Logic 10.5 Live Loops work grid, check out my guide in the description down below. I've got a full comprehensive guide taking you through all of the features inside of Logic Live Loops. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one.